good enough. There we go.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm so glad that I get to do this with you now because after this road trip, you make so much more sense to me.
Yeah, but why? Why?
Well, it takes a certain type of grit to be able to be at home with yourself all the time.
Yeah.
And you've been doing this for a long time. And it's part of the inspiration for me to do it is to see that it's possible first of all. So that's like part of the gratitude of being able to be here is like, oh man, you were one of the people that inspired me to do this. So first of all, thank you.
Yeah, man.
I'm really excited to be here with you. First of all, we're with Mike Bledsoe, the homie, and we're gonna have some serious fun today.
I love serious fun.
Good. So, what are you serious about right now?
Well, I've been translating serious to intentional.
Great.
For a while. I'd say the last like 6 months. And that started with a girl I was dating. And, how serious are you? I was like, well, I'm not really that serious. But I'll be intentional. And that actually made her really dig me.
Mm-hmm. Chicks dig intentional.
Yeah. But right now I am in the process of really growing two businesses. One I touch lightly, and the other one I touch heavily. And yeah, I'm very intentional about that. Spending a lot of time, energy, a little obsessive about it. So one is, and that's really a stepping stone. So getting that business to a point where, and my goal is to get all my businesses to a point where they don't need me. My participation is voluntary. And that seems to be the most rewarding experiences in business that I've found. I'm also I'm very intentional. I guess you could say serious about a project where we're putting together a group of people to buy a large piece of land for the purpose of regenerative farming and hosting retreats and also community living.
So for someone who might not know what regenerative farming is compared to what like they might perceive to be farming as, what's the difference there?
So the way that the typical farming is done in the United States and a lot of other places in the world is there's a lot of tilling that's going on, and the tilling is actually disrupting the topsoil, and it's useful. It's a great short-term farming strategy because what it does is it pulls the nutrients up from maybe a foot underground up to the surface and gets things moving around and makes the ground soft enough to plant seeds. And there's a whole method that goes along with tilling, but also that's one of the issues. Another issue is just monocultural farming. That is a farm that only grows one thing. Two of the biggest farms in the United States, it'd be corn and the other one being soybean growers. And so the one plant being grown on the same ground over and over again basically just keeps pulling the same nutrients out. And so what's happening is the farmers are pulling the nutrients out of the ground, putting them into the plant, and then selling the plants, but then there's nothing putting the nutrients back into the ground, especially when you only have one single crop. And so what farmers are doing is they're buying supplies, a lot of them from Monsanto. They're buying fertilizer. They're buying fertilizer that's made from oil, for one. They're buying, and the fertilizer is only good for growing things quickly and in large quantities, not of high nutrient value. And so they're having to buy the seeds, they're having to buy fertilizers, they're having to buy all this stuff outside of the farm. They bring it to the farm and they output they output plants. And so it's problematic because they're using the soil, and it's just the soil is just getting less and less nutrient dense, which means that, like, if I go to a grocery store and I look at the average vegetable, it actually is not that nutrient dense compared to if I go to Regenerative Farm
Mm.
and I eat a carrot there versus a carrot on the shelf at Walmart or even Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
They taste very different.
Mm.
One is very rich in flavor, and the other one is kind of bland. But if you've never had access to that level, you don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so, regenerative farming is where you really don't need anything coming in from the outside. And there's a lot of things going on inside that it's regenerative of the land, so it's regenerative of the soil.
So it's not just taking nutrients out; it's actually putting nutrients back in.
A lot of nutrients back in. And so there's been many cases of people who've started farms in areas that were considered to be lost. Like the land had been damaged to too much of a degree. And so the idea is you have an EIO farm, an old McDonald EIO farm, which is you have the chickens, you have the livestock, you have multiple different types of plants being grown, and there's a rotation going on. And so if one part of the land is gotten too much exposure to something, you rotate something that regenerates it and makes the soil healthy again. And there's so many details we could go into, but the general concept is that our modern agriculture is primarily just taking from the soil and not giving back in. And regenerative farming is really honoring the natural, like really looking at nature and mimicking that, and then creating structure around that in a way that is we're being good stewards as human beings on the planet by saying, okay, we're going to really take care of the planet, and the planet's going to take care of us. And so my motivation for doing that is something I've been really paying attention to since 2011 when I read Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, and he visited what was called a biodynamic farm in Virginia run by a guy named Joel Salatin. And this whole concept was brought to me, and I realized that as he was walking us through that in the book, it's like, this is the highest quality food. One of the reasons people need to take nutritional supplements in the United States is because the nutrients aren't in the food, so we had to somehow extract it and put it in a pill for you to swallow or whatever. And so even if you're shopping at Whole Foods, it's not that nutrient dense by comparison of something that's really not been fucked with too much.
As you're explaining this to me, I'm actually a lot of dots are clicking for me, because agriculture is something that pre-exists the modern economy, and it was its own form of economy. But back then, before we had what would be more of a capitalist system, we had lots of craftsmen. So you had people that worked with metal, you had farmers, you had craftsmen, artisan type of experience. And then as the modern economy changed, as we moved into a more industrial age, farming particularly needed to be systemized in order to be effective in the market. And so over time, the way to be more exact and precise with your production is to start doing things that chemically that are reliable, despite the fact that it might completely damage the soil. That you can get this over and over and over again. So it's become like this system that is evolved over time that now seems like, and probably is, the big bad wolf, the Monsantos of the world, that are now genetically making soybeans that are that won't grow beyond a certain season, so they're set to die genetically. So you have to keep rebuying the seed and the beans, so you can't regenerate with your own stuff because it actually dies. So there's that.
It's made to die.
It's made to die. Exactly. And so what I'm seeing around the world right now is that there's this big push away from the middle either into like insane tech and efficient agriculture, or technology where like fewer hands are touching, more robotic, more automated, more predictable. But there's also been this high shift towards the artisanal side, or the creative side, the craft side. And because technology exists now that didn't exist before, these artisans, these craftsmen, these regenerative farmers, these metal workers, these woodworkers that would never compete on price can be seen, find an audience, and get their message out there. And so there are going to be some people that participate in the really big industrial complexes of the world. But I think what I'm seeing and what I'm designing in myself is more intentionally made things, more intentionally done things. And
Yeah.
this farming practice, it sounds like it has to be so intentional, because you're not just farming one thing and manipulating a few variables. You're trying to create this whole ecosystem that feeds off of itself.
Yeah. The problem with what you're talking about is minimizing variables. Is when people are minimizing variables, they're actually and they're isolating, right? So if there's these two words I've been playing around with. So I want everyone to close your eyes. Yeah, take a deep breath. And I want you to see with your mind's eye. When I say the word isolation, what's the picture that popped up in your mind? And if you didn't see anything,
Oh, I saw something.
I know you did.
Okay.
Because you have practice of this. But if people don't,
Mm.
every word that you hear or say or think creates a picture in your mind. And that picture then can manifest into reality if you choose to. Now, we know that before things get manifested into physical reality, it must first be manifested by the mind. And so if we control the mind, or we dictate the mind, or we manage the mind well, then we can manage our physical space well too. So I'm going to try this again, and I'm going to say isolation. What's the picture that comes to your mind? And what we're doing is we're going to tap into wisdom here. Isolation. All right, what do you hear? What do you see, Brooks?
For me, it was a cold, dark room by myself with a bed, almost like a prison cell. That was what came up for me.
Yeah, I have something similar. Isolation doesn't feel good. There's something about it. There's something built into your system deep down. And I would love for people hit us up on Instagram or wherever you want to contact me on Instagram. But I want to hear, like, what did you see? And I'm going to make a post about this week.
Yeah.
Now, close your eyes again. So everyone got their isolation picture. Just take a breath. Cleanse the palate of the mind. Now, integration.
Man, the first thing that came to mind was this like beautiful quilt of all the things that I love, just quilted into one thing, and I was like wrapping myself in my own warm, cozy quilt.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah. So there's a reason these words have meaning to us, and there's a reason these words create visualizations. And I think a lot of times people just put these words aside, and if you, to me, this is part of tapping into your own wisdom, is slow down, close your eyes. What does that mean to you? And so in one, you're in a cold cell by yourself, maybe concrete or stone. And in another one, you see this beautiful quilt that you can wrap yourself in and be warm. And so I think the average person just throws that away and looks outside of themselves to someone else to tell them what to do. But if we look at these two different farming practices, one of these farm practices is an isolation practice. How can we isolate? So anytime we start minimizing variables, we're isolating. It's very important for scientific research where you isolate by minimizing variables. So by working with Monsanto, by manipulating the land heavily, by tilling, by by bringing in artificial fertilizers instead of relying on natural fertilizers. We're reducing the variables. We're isolating. So if you go look at a piece of farmland and it's got all one piece of thing, you look at it, it's got this block and it's isolated. But if you think about a farm that's integrated, it's connected. Integration is connection, and the the integral or the integrated farm or the regenerative farm it's looking at all aspects of nature and saying how can, instead of rejecting a piece of nature and trying to isolate ourselves from it, how do we harness it for what we want? So instead of using pesticides that were designed in World War II for the purpose of fucking people up, and instead we rebranded it for we took the Nazis technology and rebranded it to kill bugs. So instead of doing that, like we can go, okay, what in nature will keep these bugs and other things from eating our plants and destroying our crops? Oh, there's these other plants you can grow around these plants that actually protect them. Oh, well, not only that, that same plant happens to make the soil, allows the plants to talk to each other and share information, and so on and so forth. Oh, and by the way, if we want to run an aquaponics system and we have fish in a pond that are going to fertilize, it's going to be the highest quality fertilizer that's going into these. And we also have the fish that we're feeding from what's happening on the farm, and it's got this circular thing going on. And not to even, like, you can go watch a documentary. I recommend people watch Kiss the Ground. You can get a better idea of all this. They do a really great job. But it is one of these systems is fighting nature. And one of these systems is harmonizing with nature.
Yes.
And to isolate is to fight. And to integrate is to harness. And anytime I start thinking about integration, so there's horizontal integration, right? And this you may have heard a term like this used somewhere else. Forget about that. Let's think about it the way I'm going to describe it right now. Horizontal integration is saying what is available right now in this space right now that we can harness and bring together. You know, we got 100 people in a room. How do we integrate these 100 people to come up with a better solution? You know, how do we use these 100 people to solve a problem or whatever? But then there's also integrating over time. And one way to think about time is, this has been said by, I'm not remembering his name right now, but he said there's no passage of time, there's only an expansion of consciousness. And I really love that because it makes so much sense, is because every moment that passes is an expansion of consciousness.
Right, because we're always building on what came before it.
Right.
We're not leaving it behind. We're building on top of it.
Right.
On top of the memories, on top of the knowledge, on top of the wisdom.
Right. You're adding to it. You're expanding. Some are expanding more quickly than others. And what they're doing with that expansion matters. Now, if you're expanding and isolating, then you're judging everything that came before. Mm-hmm. And you're rejecting everything that contributed to this current moment. But if you are somebody who integrates over time, this is actually called transcendence. To transcend and include. And so there are major markers of development and expansion of consciousness. It comes in cycles. And so people talk about transcendence, and they're probably talking about this, you know, they're referencing that time they got high or they had this big epiphany or whatever. But transcendence really is to expand, but also to include what came before. And so I think what we have with the use of technology, the technology we have at our at hand now, while also looking at how do we integrate our space in nature, but also not throw out this technology as something that can be used to help us harness nature even more appropriately and more effectively. And so to me, that's the real key, is using that technology that could be used to just produce more quantity
Right.
to help us also increase the quality of what we're putting out.
Yeah.
Because what we have is a very quality or quantity driven economy. And we have a very quantity driven, we want to get the price as low as possible, and we want to get as much as possible for the least amount of money,
Yeah.
the least amount of value. And so, like, I think a lot of this was lost around World War II, and so many people, you know, the United States put so much effort into
Winning the war.
winning the war, and by the way in which we did that is we had way more output.
Mm-hmm.
We had factories.
Yes.
We led the industrial age, and we used that industrial knowledge and technology to create weapons, and also to it was after that the United States government decided to subsidize corn and soy because they knew that if you cut off food, if you run out of food, you can't fight a war.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, well, how can we make food as cheap as possible? Okay, corn is easy to grow, and it's something easy to manipulate, and it just grains in general. Grains in general, you can store for years in a silo. Other things you can't store for so long. So, you know, these grain-based carbohydrates are extremely cheap.
There was a lot of incentive into building an infrastructure that supports the massive growth of these crops.
Yeah.
And what's even crazier is that now we have like so much land dedicated to corn and soybean and things like that, and a lot of it is going to feed animals that we've put on another plot of land that are isolated by themselves on this other plot of land, like cows, for example.
Yeah.
Now they're isolated, and to me, I'm like, okay, they may not have conscious frontal lobes being able to self-identify as a cow, but they know stress and they know psychological damage. Cows can know that too. Even though they can't self-identify, they can know when things aren't natural. They can know when they're isolated. They can know when they're out of touch with nature, and they pass that on in their tissues, and we're consuming the food.
Well, they're experiencing stress.
Yes.
And more cortisol is going to make for a less healthy meat. It's going to create more inflammatory fats in that meat.
They're also consuming a less diverse variety of food. So they're only getting a certain amount of nutrition. So
I'll walk you through how this works. So we subsidize corn. We'll just focus on corn so that we could build up wealth as a nation and have the strongest military possible. And the United States was not really interested in war too much until Woodrow Wilson fucked up, and he later admitted that he did by getting us in World War I, which then set us up to go into World War II, which pulled us into it. I say us, I'm talking about the U.S. government. It's not really the people. Let's differentiate that. The governments are at war, not us. And so they wanted to have a war machine. And so it's like, we got to make cheap food so that we can spend that other money on creating a strong military. They were successful. The unintended consequences was diabetes, heart disease, and just an inflamed brain that can't comprehend shit.
And a rush in a larger amount of psychological disorders, a larger amount of health disorders.
Yeah, because there's brain inflammation happening with this that people are not recognizing. People do not want to admit that the average American's brain is not functioning at a very high level at all.
Yes.
If you're fat, your brain, your cognition is being impacted.
Yeah.
Even if you're a sharp person, like, you're far from your
potential. And a lot of the reason that we have such a health crisis is because we've set up these systems to favor cheaper, faster food. And if you're which is raising the cost, which did raise the cost of very well-made food. And then now that you're not eating very good food, you have, especially if you are socioeconomic class is lower, you have to be very choosy about how you spend your money. Then you're gonna have to eat this cheaper food, which is going to perpetuate this problem problem of like not feeling good, passing on diseases, incurring tons of debt and costs of the future for medical bills. You're seeing insurance skyrocket because it's now no longer a possible eventuality that you'll get sick that you're insuring. It's an inevitability that you'll get sick in the current system. So we've just allowed insurance companies to be money managers, to hold our money that maybe they'll give us if we qualify back to us when we actually
Not
need
just
it.
qualify, cooperate.
Cooperate, yeah.
Comply.
Otherwise, you might get isolated.
That's the big threat.
That is the big threat.
And so, man, quite the rant. I love it. Hey, y'all should all rewind and listen to that again because he said a lot in a very short period of time. That was dense and correct. So, the only reason I was able to keep up is because I already know what you're saying. Like we've been hanging out, and we're on the same page. So what we did is we created all this corn, and we had an abundance. We had so much corn that scientists started coming in and having to manipulate it to make. Corn doesn't fucking make syrup. How did we get syrup out of corn?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any fucking sense. But you fractionate it enough times, you fuck with it enough times, you genetically modify the corn well enough, and you can get corn syrup, which is cheap sugar. And so, I mean, there's a lot of fuckery going on out there. I mean, the government creates taxes on sugar coming in from other countries, and then subsidize corn. And, of course, we get stuck with shitty sugar. So not all sugar is created equal, but generally sugar, you want to avoid it, but especially corn, sugar comes from corn syrup.
If they're putting it in to the food, that's your sign.
Yeah.
If they're putting it into the food.
Yeah.
Yeah, you eat some fruit. Yeah, there's sugar.
Yeah.
Occurring.
Yeah,
but if they're putting it in, and you were talking about all the different ways they could make corn, that's the cereal industry.
Entire cereal industry.
How many different ways can we turn this same thing into a new brand?
It's the entire center of a grocery store.
Yes.
Look around on the labels and see what doesn't have corn. And the reason is because it's subsidized and there's an abundance, and the farmers are on welfare. They're going to get guaranteed payment. Regenerative farming is like 10 times more profitable but it's hard to change. People don't like change. Half of the farmers out there are over the age of 70.
Yeah.
You think those guys are going, I should do it all different now?
No.
So, and then, I mean, yeah, you watch Kiss the Ground documentary, and, these guys are trying to teach these farmers. You can tell they're there to get the free meal and a coffee. You know what I mean? So going back to the cattle. So the corn subsidy is what allows for this for our cattle to be raised the way they are. So, what ends up happening? The way it used to go is you would raise a cow, and this is where it happens in other parts of the world quite a bit. You raise a cow, it eats grass, and maybe you feed a little bit of grains here and there, and then take it to slaughter. And maybe give a little grain at the end to like fatten it up, and then you take it to slaughter. That's all right. But what's happened now is a rancher, and by the way, I know some of these ranchers. This is firsthand. They're really calf farmers. They only raise the calf to 6 months, and then they sell it to one of these big corporate entities that then ship them off, and they take them to what's called a CAFO. And that's where you've probably driven by one. That's where you see all the cows, and they're all in one spot, and it's just a bunch of dust or mud. No grass anywhere, right? So this is where a cow goes to live its last 6 to 9 months. All right? So in its last 6 to 9 months, and it's that period of time is because you can feed a cow a bunch of grains and corn and all this stuff. It's not made to eat that shit, by the way. It's made to eat grass. But what happens when you start feeding the cows grains over time, the benefit is it weighs more. And they're selling this beef by the pound.
Yes.
But the drawback is the grains are causing inflammation. And the response is that the cow then starts creating more omega-6 fatty acids that produce in the meat. Whereas if it's eating grass, it's omega-3s, which is anti-inflammatory. The omega-6 is pro-inflammatory. So if you're eating one type of meat, you are putting yourself at risk in health. But if you're eating another kind of meat, you're benefiting yourself from health. Not all meat is created equal, and this is the conversation people are not willing to have. It's a lazy mind that wants to avoid nuance and distinction.
Yes.
And if we want to pull ourselves out of this, it's going to require that people take on nuance and distinction and listen and actually understand what words mean. So one of the nuances is one of the things that is happening is meat is bad. Is something that's been said. It's like no. The way we've been producing meat is bad.
Yes.
The way that it used to be produced and the way that it's being produced in a lot of places, and the meat I eat is being produced very well. In fact, I could live primarily off of just meat and be very, very healthy.
Which is, I mean, not to us, but to some people, it's an insane and controversial thing to say that you could eat practically just meat and be super healthy.
Yeah, and the only thing that's controversial too is what has been put out by the mainstream media, which is
or mainstream science.
Yeah, which is like less than 1% of the truth.
Yes.
And I love science.
Oh yeah, we're both in alignment.
But I know how much science is responsible for what I can comprehend as truth, and it's tiny. It's really, really tiny. So that's a whole nother show for a different day. But what's happening is because the grains are so cheap, they can then fatten up the cows with this. But you know what? You know how long a cow can survive on grains? Not very long at all. Because it gets infected. It's more prone to infection. The immune system depresses. It's got a lot of inflammation. You know, inflammation is this, that's the source of disease. It's not really the source. It's what happens before disease symptoms are seen. So they pump up with antibiotics. So they destroy the entire biome of the cow, and they just hop them up on antibiotics and steroids. And right before the cow would die on its own, you know what they do? That's what they slaughter. That's what ends up on your plate.
Yeah. You know, it's so easy to grasp this when we talk about a mammal. Yeah. It's an easy conversation to grasp because you're like, well, okay, maybe this is the first time they're hearing this, which probably not, but maybe it is the first time that you're hearing that this is how meat is produced in the United States unless you're very conscious about how you get it, okay? But it's an easy thing to grasp. Oh, wow, if you're giving cows things that make them sick and you know that that it gets them sick and you know that they're getting them sick so much that you're systematically pumping them with antibiotics and steroids to counteract the sickness that you're giving them, just to fatten them up, just to put it on our plate, it's easy to grasp. But if we say the same thing about vegetables, it's hard to understand. But we are depriving our vegetables of the nutrition that they need that makes the vegetables sick. The agriculture is sick, and we're putting that on our plate too.
Yeah.
And we're wondering why, and you said this was dense earlier, so I'm going to try to slow it down and break this down. Imagine that you are a standard average citizen in the United States of America. You make an average.
I'm triggered.
Triggered. Don't average.
I'm average and standard now.
Average and standard. We're just playing this as a thought exercise. Calm down, Mike. We don't have to make you average.
I'm emotionally triggered, and I can't hear anything else you might say.
You have a family. Let's just say a family of 4, working class parents, middle class parents. Costs of living compared to being a middle class citizen of the 50s, the 60s, the 70s is actually higher than it used to be. Your dollar doesn't stretch as far as it used to be. For the last 40 years, 50 years of your life, you've only had a certain selection of food, which is cheap, which is in the middle. You've had the meat that's coming from this industry that we're talking about. You've had the vegetables that's coming from the industries that we're talking and from the processes that we're talking about. You go, okay, I'm making these choices because I have to from an economic standpoint. This is the system that I've been given. Then I start to notice that everyone in my family we get sick pretty often. And so we need to go see the doctor. And we do the primary care thing. And, the primary care physicians of this era are well-intentioned, but I can tell you personally that I've taught very many primary care physicians how to be healthy. They are experts in disease and how to cure disease, but they're not experts in
disease symptom management.
Disease symptom management. Yeah, exactly.
Not even disease management; it's symptom management.
Correct. And
by the way, yeah, I'm with you. I interact with a lot of people in the medical field. This is true.
Yes.
This is not always, but this is rampant. 99% of these medical professionals are they're not trained to do anything other than
And
that.
you're
It's
starting
not
to
their.
see.
I
Yeah.
mean, it is their fault.
They're
'Cause
responsible,
they're
but I'd say
responsible,
it's not that
but
they didn't choose
know.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, when they went to medical school, they thought they were getting something else.
Correct.
But then by the time they finish, they've been so indoctrinated that they can't even see another option.
Yep. So you're working your, your middle class family. You've been participating in the system that you were told was supposed to work. You've gone to the schools you're supposed to go to. You've eaten the pyramid like you're supposed to. You've gotten the job like you're supposed to, and you have insurance, which is really nice because that's also a pretty, it's a nice luxury.
They used
these
to
days.
require it.
Used to require it, and so
for
you
a
have
good 2 years until
exactly
they realized that they were
that was
a
that was
violation
tough.
of human rights. But
yeah, that's exactly right. So
yeah.
so you've participated in the systems, and despite the fact that you've done everything that seemed like it was things supposed to do, people in your family and all around you are getting really sick later in life, and the bills are stacking up a lot. And you go and you're like, "Hey, insurance company, I've been paying you for the last 20 years. You've been taking I've been paying you out of my wages to hold this money for me because I didn't know if I was going to need it, and now I need it." And then an insurance company says, "Yeah, we're not going to cover this, that, this, or the other." And they've held your money and they've made money off of your money, and they're not going to give you your money back when you need it. Now, here's the problem.
And not only that, the insurance companies are dictating the policy of how doctors can dictate the policies of insurance companies dictate the standard of care that the doctor can give you, which is separate from what they may have learned in medical school.
Mm-hmm. I know
Which
people.
Is most medical schools are also funded by pharmaceutical companies.
And I know people that work in medical device sales that got a degree in marketing that are teaching doctors how to use the equipment.
Yeah.
That's what they do. And you're like, whoa. So my point is this. Now all of a sudden, healthcare costs are going way up because more people are experiencing higher levels of sickness. So even though our mortality rate, the level at which the age at which we die has gone up, has gone down, our morbidity rate, the amount of time that we spend sick, has been skyrocketing for decades. And they track very closely to the rise that Mike was describing from post-World War II, where these industrial systems start to take over. They had their purpose, but they were designed for a short-term solution of war that have been co-opted by companies and slap some marketing on to be sold as the norm. And now what you're seeing is health insurance, healthcare costs are insanely high because everyone is sick. And everyone is sick because that's the food that we've been given.
Yeah. By the way, I've got a solution for this stuff. This is freaking you out, and you feel like it's hopeless.
No, that's why we're having. Yes,
I've got a very simple solution.
And please tell them, because that is the point. We're talking about this one household. Now multiply that by 100 million households. Or however many households we have in the United States.
I want to make one other thing is, if you're eating a lot of food that has pumped full of antibiotics and steroids, you know what you're going to get at the doctor?
Antibiotics and steroids.
That's right. just so you know, it's someone who goes and. Those are like two medications that are prescribed really heavily.
Yeah.
And not anabolic steroids.
Yes.
I'm talking about other types of steroids.
And so to close this up into a nice little loop,
I'm going to share
what I've loved about regenerative farming is that it starts to tackle this issue on a large scale. Because not only is it going to improve and possibly solve the challenges with industrial farming, that's going to have secondary and tertiary effects that are going to improve the marketplace of health and well-being, because now people won't be as sick as often, which means it won't be as costly. And our economy, the United States economy, among many reasons, is very stressed, and a part of that is because of the cost that it's costing the average citizen to be sick in the country, which now, as we've talked about, is a near inevitability if you follow the prescription.
I want to say obesity rates at 70%, and chronic pharmaceutical drug use is at 55%, and 15% of the U.S. population is on psychiatric drugs.
That's more than 1 in 10.
That means that more than 1 in 10 people driving down the road are fucking on psychiatric drugs. Driving a killing machine. And then the other 55% are on some type of. I don't think I've ever taken a drug from a doctor where it didn't impact my level of consciousness.
Level of consciousness, and just like besides the temporary moments of feeling good while the drug's on, the off of it. It's
my ability to be present is always impacted.
Well, yeah. So, like I said, regenerative farming seems to start to tackle these things, and because you're here, I'm going to indulge myself. A lot of these macro concepts are once you start to see them and once you start to pull at it and unravel, you allow yourself to realize. I mean, a lot of the things that we take for granted as normal are so new in the context of humans, and we are still in the experimental phase of seeing how that shows up on a massive scale. And the number one experiment that I have just been racking my brain lately is I have now come to the belief, and again, this is a story that I'm playing based on observation, that part of the challenge that we're living in 2020, a decision was made in 1988, I believe, to make the first reality TV show. And although at first it was really raw, and it was very close to reality, those early Real World.
Oh yeah.
And so when I think it was the first season or the second season, one of the cast members had he came out as HIV positive, and he actually died. And so like there were some very raw moments of reality TV, but as industry does, it takes this art or this craft and it says, how can we reproduce this? Well, it starts to produce things, and as soon as you start to produce things, you're no longer allowing things to be reality, and yet we've called it reality TV ever since, and it's become the number one TV genre. And we know that it's not reality, and we've opted into calling it reality even when we know that it's not.
Yeah.
And so to me, now that I've like experienced some massive like cognitive shifts just around my language, my personal language, how I describe myself, I'm thinking about it on a 350 million American / 3.5 billion humans around the world that have adopted this language of calling reality when inside we know that it is not.
Yeah.
And now, well, maybe not now, as we're sitting here, Joe Biden is the presumptive winner of the presidential election. But we had
that's what the media is saying.
That's what they're saying, and who knows? Usually, as the media goes, so too goes the election.
Yeah.
But my point is that we've gotten to this place. Look, it's besides the people that are emotionally invested to the point of not being able to use critical thinking, it is pretty clear if you have critical thinking that the type of politics that we have now is a complete dog and pony show. And we may choose and favor one side over the other, but all things being equal, I think we can all agree that shit's really wild in 2020.
Yeah,
and
I don't care who got voted in.
Shit was wild.
It's fucking gross.
And again, I think a lot of it, again, it's like wild to say this, but I think a lot of it is starting from the fact that we've allowed ourselves to call things reality when we know inside that it's not. That when a person shows up like Donald Trump, who will now just blatantly say that things aren't real, when you can see with your own eyes that they are, people are just like, sure, yeah, let's go, let's do it. And like we are hitting what I hope to be a tipping point. Because we've shifted from the industrial age and industrial revolution. They're calling it a different industrial age. I prefer to call it the digital age. We're transitioning from one age to the other, and all the systems that we built to support the age are now no longer they don't fit. It's like putting a square peg in a round hole now. We're building this new era, and again, we started this by saying regenerative farming. Regenerative farming is one way. You're seeing like more natural, like bioarchitecture, where people are integrating architecture instead of isolating architectures, instead of stripping the land and then laying some houses and some concrete and then covering up and recreating grass. They're architects that are actually taking nature into account. And Singapore is like a really high example of some people of a nation in it's a small scale, but they've used green technology in architecture to now clean up their systems, so much so that certain animals have returned to the seas and the rivers that haven't been seen in like decades.
Yeah.
And so it's possible. We're now living in the age where this is possible. But what it takes is people allowing their minds to open that, hey, things that worked before are not going to work anymore. What got us here won't get us where we need to go.
Yeah, that brings us to, well, I'm not hopeless. And if you're feeling hopeless with us describing all the problems that exist, the solution is personal responsibility. And if anything, I've learned this past year and watching just everything happen with government and with politics is that I didn't realize how bad it was. It's made me pretty sad on how much people are relying on some magic organization in the sky is going to come down and solve the problems because you voted a certain way.
Yeah.
It's how many people have given up their power to something that's not, it's made up.
And it's incentivized not to benefit us to its highest degree.
No. I mean, government's a governor, right? It's in the word. It's meant to limit certain things. And they limit things to incentivize behavior and steer culture in a specific direction. This is why people get so hot and bothered over elections, is because everyone's worried that someone else is going to have their opinion is going to become a law and they're going to dictate your behavior. And then now you're going to have to deny your own conscience. And no one wants to have to deny their own conscience in the face of, potential imprisonment or violence. And so I think that's one reason it gets so heated. But and I think that emotional experience then causes an identity experience, and then they latch on to some savior. But if you ask them if you think that Joe Biden's a savior or Donald Trump is a savior, they'll say no. But their fucking Instagram posts and their Facebook posts do not tell me. They might as well. I feel like they're talking about Jesus at this point. And so, what I mean by personal responsibility is like, what the fuck are you gonna do about it? And going to the ballot box is almost nothing.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at how much fraud there is on both sides. Like everyone, this is not a game of like. It's not a game. It's not what you think it is.
It's literally built in.
It's not a fair sport.
It's literally built into both parties to have their own mechanisms for manipulating the vote in their favor. And Republicans are really known for gerrymandering, which means they like resituate counties to get the blocks that they need to win. But Democrats are also known for like pushing the vote out to possibly people that aren't voters
aren't alive.
Exactly. Well, we were talking about hope.
But So it's
There's
personal
hope. I
responsibility.
promise.
What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
Look at your life. Go look. It's a long process. It is not something that happens overnight, and I think it never ends. And for me, it was it got down to like what kind of food do I buy? What farms am I supporting? What industries am I supporting? If I see a problem, I stop spending money there. I stop giving it attention. I do my best to practice I ignore that and I put my attention somewhere else. I put my money, time, energy somewhere else. Like the toothpaste I use, the food I order, the just so many. It's hard for me to think about right now, but I don't watch TV.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention to advertising. I get rid of ads as much as possible. I subscribe to things. And then I pay attention to the companies I'm giving money to and what it is that they're doing in the world. And so, even me, when I look at my own life, I go, wow, I buy mostly from farms that are doing good in the world. I put out good shit on Instagram. I try to help people as much as possible. I look at the totality of my life and go, oh, I'm doing a pretty good job. There's areas in which I could do better. It's like, okay, I live an interesting lifestyle where I'm bouncing around from Airbnb to Airbnb, and it would be a little bit better for me and the planet if I were to just stay in one spot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I'm working towards now. But we got to really take personal. And here's the thing: is like, what do you? What I mean by what are you gonna do about it? Is what are you complaining about? And this is where, like, here's the thing: is you can only respond to so many things
Yeah.
in the world. You're limited, and that's a beautiful thing. We're supposed to be limited so that we can create a priority. And so I think that this happens during election cycles, especially is there's these dozen things you should worry about, and we can take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
No, they can't.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to take care of it. If they could have taken care of it, like Democrats make promises, like we're going to do all this stuff. It's like you said that for 20 years. You actually had the presidency in the House and the Senate at these different times, and what did you do with it? Oh wait, the Republicans do the same thing. Oh, we're going to do all this stuff. It's like you had control over everything at some point. What did you do with it? You're full of shit.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. So you got to do it yourself.
And the way that you do
So
that,
like, if you see a problem with like the way kids are being educated, what are you doing about it? Not how you vote about it. What are you doing about it? And so many people sit back and go, "We need to do something about the environment. We need to do something about education. We need to do something about." And they make the list and da da da. I was like,
but they vote with their dollars and support companies that don't support those ideals.
yeah, and they're unconscious that they're voting with their dollars,
Correct.
and supporting that way, but they are conscious of some might as well be God, like a man in the sky making promises that they're going to take care of everything.
Well, I want to highlight the fact that the reason that there are what we would call like economic conservatives, free market conservatives, that they believe that the market is a better governor of the world is because we get to vote every day.
Yeah.
Whereas with our election cycles, it's every 2 or 4 years. Every day we get to vote in our economy. And it can even be for someone's like, how can I make the next step? It's just awareness.
Well, this is where the idea of government gets dangerous. And when I say the word government, like I want to talk. I'm not talking about a real thing. It's illusory. It's
an idea that we should be governed.
It's something. There is no government. Like you can't point at it. It's not. It's a group of people who the larger group of people have given authority to. Like no one can make themselves the authority. It can only be granted by the person who needs to be authoritized to be. There's the how can I say this?
Community organizers have been around for generations, though. So
there's one thing to organize. There's another thing to organize and with using violence as your way of keeping everyone in order, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's voluntary organization, and then there's what we have.
So what I'm imagining is because we're noticing that these are challenges, instead of waiting for someone to take the lead and fix them, you're taking the lead by creating a community that you believe in, the ideals that you subscribe to. So what does that vision look like?
So, I want to cover this real quick. Is the reason I believe people are not taking responsibility is because they believe the government has got it handled. You've bought into it. And when I look at these Instagram posts and I see these Facebook posts, it does make me sad because I go, this person is probably worthless. The other, 4 years, they've done one good thing in their mind that they voted, and that was a big fucking deal. It's a big deal. In Instagram and Facebook reminded me for 2 months about it. It was such a big deal that they never put out information. But they did the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much they want you to believe in it, right? And if they want you to vote because you have to buy in, and they have to tell you that if you don't pay taxes, that they're going to kidnap you. That's how they get you to pay taxes. They're like, we'll put you in jail. We're going to kidnap you. And so it's not voluntary. And so what people have confused their conscience with obedience. or morality with obedience. So people have learned to put their conscience in the back seat and just be obedient and wait to be told and be given permission in order to take action. So where do I have power? Oh, the only place I have power is when I vote. And so because of that, people are not taking action. They're not taking personal responsibility. They're not going out. And so one of the solutions that I have is, look, what are we going to do? We're going to wait for the government to make a law or to stop subsidizing corn and take these farmers off welfare? Not going to happen.
Yeah.
You think that because it would disrupt the food industry, but it would be a good thing. It'd be painful in the short run. We could wait for them to subsidize something else, take our tax dollars and subsidize something they think is good. Look, these politicians, mostly a bunch of old white guys, they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Yeah.
They're lawyers. They're lawyers. They're not scientists. They're not business owners. They're not any of the things that are the people who actually run the country.
Yeah.
All they do is create the laws. They write things down on a piece of paper, and then they employ people with guns to make sure you follow those rules. So what you got to do is you got to go do it yourself. You think there's something wrong with education? Go in there.
I have a friend that's about to essentially create her own school.
Yeah.
It's going to be a school for living, essentially, for kids, where they're going to
Perfect.
do all their math and their English and their social studies homework, and they're going to learn how to live.
This is it.
Yes.
This is it. So you asked me about my vision. My solution is start with a farm. Start with, like, I think about if I have kids, when I have kids, how do I, if I'm going to be a responsible parent, what am I going to raise them in? I'm not sending them to school. The indoctrination of, indoctrination of nationalism. I want to teach them that they're a human being and that everyone else is equally created, not equal. No one has equal opportunity. We were all born on different days in different places, and so opportunities are infinite. But what we can do is we can buy farmland and we can buy more farmland. And when an old farmer no longer wants to run his corn or soybean farm, we can come in and we can team up with people who are educating people in regenerative farming, and we can buy that farm and start regenerative farming. And so slowly over time, we can heal the land. We can create food that heals people.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can reduce the supply of shitty food into the market and increase the supply of really healthy food in the market.
You're literally healing the market.
Healing the market. So, like, the thing is when you reduce the supply of something, you automatically make it more expensive. And when you increase the supply of something, you automatically make it cheaper. So if we decrease the supply of unhealthy food and increase the supply of healthy food, healthy food now becomes the cheaper food to eat. And now people have access to their health. This is not anything government could ever do. This comes from personal responsibility. This goes, I sat here and I go, what can I do? And I go, look, I'm really good at organizing people. I'm really good at, I have some ideas.
You understand health. You understand systems.
I understand the systems. I understand health. And I go, and I've been sitting for years and going, what's the biggest impact I can make? And one of the reasons I train coaches is because I know for every coach I impact, they're going to turn around and impact thousands of clients themselves. So if I impact 1,000 coaches, I impact 1 million people. Holy shit, that's cool. But that's education, that's interpersonal, it's all that. I've always been interested in how do we impact people on an economic level, because we know that economics is what drives the majority of unconscious behavior. And unconscious behavior is the shit that's dangerous. Conscious behavior is, makes up 5% of your experience, and you do good shit there. The other 95%, you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. So, we have to account for the herd in that, and if we care for the herd, right? And I do. Mm. So, there are people who, and when I say herd, I mean people who do not take personal responsibility. Mm. The herd, if you are a sheep, if you are expecting someone to save you, that's literally like you're in the herd and you're waiting for the shepherd or the sheepdog or whatever to protect you from the wolves, put in whatever, keep you fed, make sure you're on the right pastures, all this shit.
I want to make it clear that you can take personal responsibility by asking for help.
Absolutely.
They're not mutually exclusive.
This is about how you respond. Your ability to respond is a responsibility. And what are you choosing to respond to? And most people are just choosing no response at all. It's just, I just want things to go back to normal. Right?
Yeah.
All right, so we did that exercise. I've been wanting to do this exercise. I did it on myself last week. I thought it was really good.
Yeah.
And just like the isolation and integration exercise. I want you to close your mind. Or close your eyes.
I'm going to close my mind and my eyes. No, I'll keep my mind open and eyes closed and ready.
Okay. All right. And I've only done this on myself, so I don't know how it's going to work out for you. All right. The word is, he's going to picture something in his mind. The word is government. What do you see?
The first thing that came to mind was an old colonial wigged man rebel rousing from a stump trying to get people to pay attention.
When I say government.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I saw something different.
What did you say?
I saw a building. Saw the columns, like something you'd see in D.C.
For me, it was like somebody being loud for the sake of drawing attention. That's what I feel like.
You maybe went like to the political.
Yeah. Like
the politics.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
True. Oh, man. Yeah, you got me. Yeah,
maybe.
You're right.
It doesn't matter. I want to know what comes to mind.
Yeah.
All right. Close your eyes again. Let's try this one. Church.
That I saw the same. Tall building, tall.
Yeah.
Like the cylinder cathedral type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about is how much ritual and how much government looks like church. Like the election is a ritual.
Yeah.
If you go to court, stand, sit, ritual.
Wow.
The buildings are magnificent, like a church would be built.
Wow.
So like if you look at all of history, like government and religion has always been like side by side and coexisted. And government has always tried to control religion and leverage it to control people. And Constantine did it, right? It's how he unified the Roman Empire for a short period of time. Is he brought him under Christianity. And so, because everyone was serving a different god, and that was causing segmentation and people not to be unified under one government. And so the United States was really the first country to be like, look, man, we're going to do a government, but separation of church and state here.
Mm-hmm.
The government's not going to try to leverage religion to control people. Like there's a way it's interpreted now, and there's a way it was intended then, which are very different. Usually when people are citing separation of church and state, it's for different reasons. Like the interpretation has gotten pretty twisted. So I believe that the founders of the United States really saw that there was a problem with that. And
it wasn't just like the not having a national religion. It was literally keeping the institutions of religion out of what government looks like.
Because religion's so powerful. They were trying to limit the power of government. If you read the Constitution, it's all about limiting the government, not on what it can do, not the rights it can grant, but the things limit it so it doesn't trample over the rights that are naturally God-given. And so, anyways, I'm off on a tangent.
This
here,
is why
this is fun.
This is what me and Mike do. So I have one last prompt, and it is, what do you do for fun, and where does fun fit into your life?
What do I do for fun? Shit, man, I love to travel. I do. I do that for fun. I like interacting with fun new people all the time. New people, but different people. Man, we had a fun time last night. I've been using that rope flow. Been using that WEC rope. Been learning some new things. I like to just I like to train, but more like it's so much more playful these days. I like to play. I like to go hiking. I do that for play. My work is play in a lot of ways. Like
You're
it
one of the
melds quite a bit.
you've cultivated this. So I want to say, first of all, it's a cultivated thing. It's not something, because of those systems, of the way that they're set up, it's not something that's easy to fall into. So it's something that's cultivated, but you have chosen to create harmony between your work and your playtime.
Yeah, they actually just cross over a lot, especially when I'm working with other people. There's a lot of play
When you
in that.
integrate with other
Oh
people.
my gosh.
Oh my God.
Gosh. Full circle.
We did it,
We
dude.
did it.
Oh man, listen. You and I will have another. I imagine that you and I will be catching up on the microphones in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
we'll go ahead and sign off here. And if you followed us all the way to the end, first of all, congratulations. Okay. Second of all, you probably may need to listen to this more than once, because although we might have painted a picture that seems a bit doom and gloom, what we're really trying to do is highlight opportunities for us to step into a better future for what we want. And the way that we do that is by taking personal responsibility, knowing that we're not going to do it by isolating, and we're going to really create the change by integrating with other people. So I'm glad that you sat on the mic and integrated with me today.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
Awesome, man. Thank you, everybody. Serious Fun. Mike Bledsoe, out. Mike,
Yes.
tell me about The King Says Yes.
The king says yes. Tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Tell me about your experience.
my experience was man, what an enjoyable experience. It was. There's been very few times in my life where I was in a show like that, and the fact that it was just the three of us watching you perform the show is so much more intimate. You know, I've been in theaters where something like that's been done, and you know, I'm in there with maybe 100 people, and it's always like wow. But to have it happen in the living room for just us, it was a real joy. I have no idea how long you went on for, and it didn't matter. You could have just kept going. It was super enjoyable, and I learned. I would say I gained a deeper appreciation for uh, for Bob Marley, for reggae, and I the way in which you tell the story and how well you speak certain things. There are things that you pointed out that were very subtle that I really like, that I think people will understand. They'll actually understand a lot of things much better having been exposed to that story and that performance. So I think it's a transformational experience. The King Says Yes.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.